Good morning, everyone. I'm Angela Kahil. I'm Assistant Professor of Political Science and International Relations at the Holy Spirit University of Kaslik in Lebanon. And I'm going today to share my research about the relationship between the European Union and Lebanon, mainly focusing on the Southern Neighborhood policy, trying to implement reforms and gender equality. The relationship between the European Union and Lebanon is very crucial for the EU's broader engagement with the Middle East and North Africa region. Lebanon, given its strategic location and its role in the ongoing Syrian crisis, represents a significant partner for the EU in addressing regional stability. For instance, the EU-Lebanon Association Agreement entered in force in April 2006 and forms the legal basis of the partnership between the EU and Lebanon. Furthermore, the EU-Lebanon partnership priorities were adopted at the EU-Lebanon Association Council on November 11, 2016, where they set out the framework for EU political engagement and enhanced cooperation with Lebanon, aiming at supporting Lebanon's development as a stable, democratic, politically open, and economically strong country to promote reforms. Over the years, the EU has been Lebanon's largest donor of financial assistance. For example, between 2014 and 2020, the EU allocated approximately 1.6 billion in grants to Lebanon, aimed at stabilizing the country, promoting economic growth, and addressing the challenges posed by the Syrian refugee crisis. While Lebanon hosting around 1.5 million Syrian refugees, the EU has prioritized humanitarian assistance and institutional capacity building to support Lebanon's fragile infrastructure. For example, the EU supports Lebanon with the implementation of the 5-year General Education Plan 2021-2025, ensuring learning continuity through access to quality and inclusive education for the most vulnerable children, refugees from Syria and Lebanon, host communities. In the area of good governance, the EU supports reform in key areas of public administration in line with the principles of a modern public administration. The EU's total assistance to Lebanon since 2011 amounts to over 3.5 billion euros, including bilateral assistance, resilience assistance channeled through the EU Regional Trust Fund in response to the Syrian crisis, but also humanitarian assistance that continues nowadays with the involvement of the EU during the war in Lebanon, which counts over 30 million euros now. So the European Neighbourhood Policy, the ENP, and more specifically the Southern Neighbourhood Policy, the SNP, serves as the framework for the EU's relations with Lebanon. The SNP emphasizes political dialogue, economic cooperation, and financial aid, all tailored to ensure stability and economic development in MENA. In the case of Lebanon, this framework is further complicated by internal challenges such as political paralysis, sectarian divisions, and external pressures from regional actors. The study aims to provide actually a comprehensive analysis of the EU-Lebanon relationship by focusing on 3 primary areas: the role of the SNP, the challenges of implementing reform in Lebanon, and the EU's effort to promote gender equality through various initiatives. The objectives of the study are threefold. First, it aims to analyze how the SNP has shaped the EU's approach to Lebanon, especially in terms of fostering stability and security. The SNP provides the EU with tools to promote governance reforms and address migration challenges, both of which are central to Lebanon's situation. Second, the study examines the challenges and successes of reform implementation in Lebanon, particularly in governance, economic restructuring, and judicial reforms. Despite significant financial support from the EU, progress has been slow due to Lebanon's complex political dynamics. Finally, the study investigates the EU's initiatives to promote gender equality in Lebanon, focusing on obstacles like entrenched patriarchal norms and the progress made in areas such as combating gender-based violence and enhancing women's participation in politics. A qualitative research methodology has been employed for this study. The primary source include, of course, official EU documents, policy briefs, and reports from relevant NGOs and international organizations. For instance, the EU Commission's reports on Lebanon provide valuable insights into the progress made in implementing reforms. The secondary sources consist of academic literature, such as the Routledge Handbook of EU Middle East Relations, that was co-authored by Michel Pace, which provides very also valuable information about the challenges that the Southern Hood policy faces. So the analysis will be structured around three key themes: the SNP, reform implementation, and gender equality. So the Southern Hood policy, as part of the broader ENP, plays a crucial role in the EU engagement with Lebanon. As we said, the SNP main objectives are to promote political stability, economic development, and regional security. For Lebanon, the SNP has been a tool for fostering democratic governance, enhancing human rights, and ensuring the rule of law. Given Lebanon's proximity to Syria and its involvement in the refugee crisis, Lebanon's inclusion in the SNP is shaped by its strategic importance. The EU has prioritized migration management and humanitarian assistance, allocating significant resources in both areas. For example, between 2017 and 2020, the EU allocated 150 million euros for socio-economic projects in Lebanon, aimed at addressing the challenges of hosting a large refugee population. Additionally, the EU has taken a lead role in supporting Lebanon's recovery from the 2020 Beirut explosion. Through the Lebanon Reform, Recovery and Reconstruction Framework, the 3RF, the EU has pledged to help rebuild essential infrastructure and foster economic recovery, while emphasizing the need for governance reforms and transparency. However, the EU's efforts to promote reforms in Lebanon have faced significant challenges. The country's entrenched political elites and sectarian divisions have often resisted meaningful changes. This has been particularly evident in the areas of governance, judicial reforms, and economic restructuring. The EU support for judicial independence and anti-corruption measures have been of its broader strategy to promote transparency and accountability in Lebanon. For instance, the EU-Lebanon Association Agreement and successive action plans have placed a strong emphasis on these areas. Despite the EU's financial assistance and support technically, Lebanon's governance system, heavily influenced by sectarian power sharing, continues to limit reform efforts. An example of this is the EU criticism in 2021 of Lebanon's failure to appoint independent judges to oversee financial investigation, an essential component of anti-corruption reform. Economic restructuring has also been a priority for the EU's engagement with Lebanon. The EU provided technical assistance to help the Lebanese government implement structural reform, particularly in areas such as fiscal policy, energy, and public sector reform. However, the financial crisis that began in 2019 has overwhelmed many of these efforts. While the EU's support has provided temporary relief, the deeper structural issues within Lebanon's economy, corruption, political patronage, and mismanagement remain major obstacles to long-term economic recovery. The second point that is important also in this bilateral policy is gender equality, because it's a cornerstone of the EU's external relations policy, and its promotion in Lebanon has been an essential component of the EU-Lebanon partnership. The European Union's Joint Staff Working Document, Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment, Transforming the Lives of Girls and Women through the EU External Relations 2016-2020, or the Gender Action Plan, GAP2, for the period 2016-2020, that also has continued for the next 4 years, 2021 and 2023, 5 stresses the need for full and equal realizations of women and girls' human rights and fundamental freedoms, the achievement of gender equality, and the empowerment of women and girls. The European Union is fully committed to break the cycle of gender discrimination by supporting partner countries to establish a more enabling environment for the fulfillment of girls' and women's rights and to achieve real and tangible improvements in gender equality. So for that reason, the EU delegation to Lebanon commissioned also a gender analysis to provide insight into whether gender inequalities persist in Lebanon. So this gender analysis of 2018 looks into the causes of identified inequalities, how they intersect with other inequalities, and how they impact on human rights enjoyment and benefits produced by and access to development efforts. The EU has launched also several other initiatives aimed at advancing women's rights in Lebanon. One such initiative is the EU-funded Spring Forward for Women program, which was designed to enhance women's political participation and promote gender equality in the MENA region. In Lebanon, the program has provided training for women political candidates and supported local NGOs advocating for women's rights. Additionally, the EU has been also involved in efforts to combat gender-based violence, particularly through the Madad Fund, which addresses the needs of Syrian refugees and vulnerable host communities. So gender equality is also a key component of EU-Lebanon Gender Action Plan, which seeks to strengthen women's roles in public life and enhance their economic participation. Despite these efforts, challenges remain. Lebanon's society, as we said, is deeply patriarchal, and cultural barriers continue to limit women's participation in politics and economy. For example, the Spring Forward program faced resistance from entrenched political elites who were reluctant to support increased female representation in politics. Moreover, legal reforms aimed at protecting women from gender-based violence have been also difficult to implement due to societal resistance and the lack of political will. The results of the study show that the EU's engagement with Lebanon through the Southern Neighbourhood policy has mixed outcomes. While the EU has made some progress in promoting governance reform and supporting civil society, the overall impact has been limited by Lebanon's internal political dynamics. The EU support for reform implementation has been stymied by Lebanon's sectarian system and the resistance of entrenched elites. In terms of gender equality, EU initiatives have also succeeded in raising awareness and providing support to local NGOs, but deep-rooted societal norms continue to impede significant achievement. In conclusion, the relationship between the EU and Lebanon is shaped by a complex interplay of regional and domestic factors. The Southern Neighbourhood policy provides a comprehensive framework for engagement, but its success in Lebanon depends on overcoming significant internal challenges. Achieving lasting positive outcomes will require sustained commitment and collaboration between the EU, Lebanese authorities, and civil society. Ultimately, while progress has been made, the path forward will require addressing both the structural barriers within Lebanon and the broader regional challenges that continue to impact the EU-Lebanon relationship. Thank you for listening, and I'm available for any question if you have any.